Hi, my name is Tom DeMeo, partner with the Cybersecurity and Privacy Practice at PKF O'Connor Davies. Cybersecurity will be a key business risk in 2025, and a key component of managing that risk is going to be understanding it. Let myself and my partner, Nick Delana, walk you through what we believe will be the 7 key cybersecurity predictions for 2025. So 2024, just like we've seen in prior years, is another record-breaking year when it comes to cybersecurity events. And even when we look forward, by 2025 alone, we're projected, well, actually it is 2025 at this point, we're projected to be 10.5 trillion in losses as a result of cybercrime. When we look at the increase of just phishing, we're up almost 1,000% compared to where we were in the prior year. When we think about, the cost of a data breach, it continues to climb, right? Roughly, 4.8 million if an incident was to occur. When we look at these trends, the big belief of mine is that the past is very much a predictor of the future. And seeing how things are moving, and as we project into 2025, I think we're going to see a lot of the same, and we'll go into what that is in a second, but it's going to be the evolution. We're going to see the continued attacking of third parties and going after the supply chain. You're going to see AI really move itself into the equation even more aggressively as we move in and we go into the coming years. AI, right? This has very much become a hot topic, not even just from a operational standpoint, but from a risk standpoint. We're moving into the realm where, kind of like the old Star Wars movie, we're going into computer versus computer effectively. And when it comes to AI, especially as it relates to cybersecurity, one of the key things is that it's dropping the barrier of entry, right? It's making it easier for individuals that don't have as much technical skills to start to get into the cyber criminal space, to facilitate the creation of phishing campaigns, to get them out that much more quicker, which when you take the ease and the speed, well, you're going to have better results, right? In terms of more and more individuals falling for the attacks. When you start to layer in then deepfakes and voice cloning, things that historically we were able to anchor ourselves on and trust, well, now we can. And once you start feeding on top of that in terms of, the algorithms creating social media platforms and really kind of creating these identities, not just from a visual or an audio, but then feeding it with almost these day-to-day life activities, it becomes very hard to distinguish between what's real versus what's fake.
We're also seeing attacks against third parties and supply chains, and we're anticipating that to continue and get worse in 2025. Attackers will continue to look for methods to infiltrate software supply chains, insert malicious code, with companies using an average of 371 software as a service or SaaS apps. Most organizations do not have proper visibility into their supply chain, and as a result, don't know how to respond to a cyber attack on one of their third parties. Attackers have been relying on these blind spots to infiltrate businesses and keep persistence within the environments. Defense against these attacks requires proper cyber hygiene, meaning having the right controls and tools and capabilities in place, monitoring for behavioral changes in users and applications, and proper due diligence on these SaaS apps before implementing them as solutions, and then periodically reviewing these apps thereafter.
Separate from the supply chain, and it's almost kind of tied to it, is you're going to see this advanced privilege exploitation or escalation. When we think about privileged accounts, right? These are the accounts that pretty much have full access. And even the FBI recently put out an alert on local administrative access and trying to remove it and control it. All of that is essentially about this, how the attackers get in, and from a low level or from a less unprivileged standpoint, how do they escalate and then pivot? Even when it comes to the cloud, a lot of organizations have this conception that, well, it's in the cloud provider is going to secure it. That's not always the case. The entity itself very much becomes the conduit to the cloud. And when you start taking all these different clouds, right, which sounds simplistic in and of itself, and you have these interdependencies between them, because now the clouds are talking to the clouds, and then you have central points of identity management, right? I'm sure a lot of you on that are listening, you use your Office 365 account to get into different applications. That becomes a single point of trust. And if I can get to that single point of trust, just like the bad guy, well, then I'm going to leverage that, not just to get to Office 365, but they're going to leverage that to pivot to the other areas. So you're going to see a lot of that during the 2025 year and on.
Another key theme for 2025 is going to be the integration between cyber resilience and business continuity. Many of you saw some pretty major disruptions last year. CrowdStrike was one, AT&T, Microsoft 365 outages. It really affected businesses and brought a lot of people to think about how they can be more cyber resilient. What are their critical dependencies on third parties? How do they respond to a major outage where they might be relying on these third parties for critical service delivery? Combine that with the challenges from a regulatory perspective. The EU recently put into effect the Digital Operations Resilience Act, or DORA, designed to manage information and communications technology risks with a heavy emphasis on business resilience, especially with third parties. All businesses should be thinking about this, looking at the critical third parties that they depend on and how it's going to negatively or positively affect their business continuity capabilities.
Just got to pivot on the business continuity. And again, I think this is important for a lot of the listeners. Yes, a lot of organizations might be heavily dependent on that cloud. And, we're hoping that the cloud providers have the capabilities to get themselves up and running in a reasonable amount of time. But, I think what 2024 really showed us is that those big players that we thought would never go down, well, they went down. The CrowdStrike incident during the summer was a prime example. So when you're thinking about your business continuity strategy, you really got to think about, if those players go down, how are you going to operate without those key systems, right? That is going to be the core of your business continuity strategy, which, looking at everything that we're talking about between privilege escalation, between AI, resiliency, right? A core theme. This is where, too, you're going to see the evolution of what the CISO is, that chief information security officer. It's not going to be a back office function, right? You're going to see this become more and more aligned with the overall C-suite, so that the security strategy is very much aligned and supportive of the actual business strategy, right? Because that's the only way this is going to work. That CISO, that security strategy, if it's not supportive of the business, well, then you're going to have a mismatch and things are just, quite frankly, they're going to fail. So having that seat at the table, that's going to continue to evolve. Now, because so many organizations, right, unless you're of a certain size, it's very hard to justify the cost of a full-time CISO. I mean, that's the reality of it. I think what you're going to see is that smaller entities understanding the risk and boards embracing it for resolution, the role of the fractional CISO is going to also start to really come in. Where on a part-time basis, these smaller entities are getting the benefit and the skill set of what a CISO would offer, but at a fraction of the cost and a fraction of the time.
And Tom, that dovetails well into our next prediction about the regulatory environment tightening up. We're seeing a lot of regulatory responsibilities with regard to IT and cyber falling on the CISO primarily. Some of the major cybersecurity regulations coming out this year that will impact organizations and CISOs especially. DORA, as I mentioned earlier, that's the EU's regulation, has a big impact on cyber resilience, business continuity. The Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, or CMMC, this one's been in development for about 6 years now. It went into effect, part of it went into effect in December. The remainder is going to be in effect in Q2 of 2025. That impacts all companies doing business either as a prime or subcontractor in the US defense sector. Several US states, including Texas, Oregon, Florida, Montana, Minnesota, and Rhode Island, have enacted data privacy laws, very stringent with consumer rights provisions with that. And the Cyber Incident Reporting for Critical Infrastructure Act, or CIRCIA, that rule is expected to become final in 2025. That has very, very strict cyber incident reporting requirements, very quick turnaround. Companies have to have processes in place to determine, if they've been breached and report that data very quickly. So definitely a lot of movement in the regulatory front this year.
Just to kind of summarize here, yes, the cyber landscape is going to continue to evolve. And, undoubtedly, attacks and breaches, it's all going to continue to escalate. The key thing is, and our message to you is that you're not in this alone. As your partner, as your advisor, and even as your trusted digital and cybersecurity advisor, we're here to help you navigate that path. And that's part of our no greater value proposition. So if you ever need help, Nick and I are here.